The cost of buying petrol is at the highest it has ever been in the history of Nigeria. This is because Nigerians are now buying at the international market price after the federal government discontinued the payment of petrol subsidies.
No provision is there for fuel subsidy. The fuel subsidy is gone.
The resulting impacts have been brutal, affecting different sectors of the country, worst of which is the transportation sector. People are finding it increasingly difficult to get around due to a surge in fuel prices for personal cars and a sharp hike in transport fares for minibuses, shared taxis, and ride-hailing services. This has brought the topic of mobility to the forefront in the Nigerian space, as many people are seeking solutions to ease the hardship. One solution people are recommending with mixed reactions: bicycles. Bicycles offer numerous benefits for urban mobility as they promote a healthier, more environmentally friendly mode of transportation. They are a fantastic way to incorporate physical activity into one's daily routine, improving cardiovascular health, boosting energy levels, burning calories, and helping to reduce the risk of diseases associated with a sedentary lifestyle. They also produce zero emissions, helping to reduce air pollution, and they require less energy and produce less waste throughout their life cycle, from when they are produced, when they are used, and when they become bungled. Most importantly, in the face of Nigeria's current challenge, they are not powered by petrol. With all these benefits, why don't Nigerians simply buy bicycles and stop crying about the petrol subsidy removal? Aren't they the best response or solution to the increase in petrol price and related mobility challenges? I, for one, wish there were simple answers to this. I want more people to bike and reduce their reliance on private vehicles for many reasons, especially urban inclusion for different social groups. But let's look at some considerations and factors that affect the potential for bicycles to become commonplace in Nigerian cities. Before going any further, don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you haven't and leave any feedback in the comments. That said, welcome to Nigerian urbanism. I think it's important to make clear that it is not impossible to develop a cycling culture in Nigeria. If you've had this conversation before in different spaces, it's very likely that you've come across people say things like, this is a foreign concept, or we don't have the weather for it. I'd like to start by addressing this. Firstly, the only inherent means of transport is walking. Every other means, from bicycles to cars, trains, ships, and planes, is a result of innovation. So they are also foreign concepts, yet that doesn't stop us from using them. More so, Nigerians used to cycle a lot. It was a very common means of mobility in villages and rural settlements across the country, and is still quite routine in some northern Nigerian towns and cities like Maiduguri and Kano. Cycling was also pretty normal in cities in the southern part of Nigeria, like in Lagos, from where this picture pops up every now and again. The popularity of bicycles in not-so-ancient Nigeria is reflected in this study by Emmanuel Mogaji, which revealed that many Nigerians have bicycles associated to their memories. At some point in time, they either owned or desired one. But let's assume all of this wasn't the case. Let's assume no one in Nigeria rode a bicycle before. Is that still a rigid limitation? Well, not really. See, different cities around the world have successfully normalized cycling as a common urban transport mode, or are trying to with commendable progress. Dutch cities obviously take the crown and are known to have the most established cycling culture in the world. The cycling culture in Paris is growing more recently. Asian cities like Singapore, Tokyo, and Shanghai offer some level of cycling convenience, and North American cities like San Francisco and Vancouver are increasingly improving their cycling culture. We'll come around to how two of these were achieved in a bit. But one thing we need to know is that these cities don't particularly have the most ideal weather for cycling. In the Netherlands, which is pretty much the cycling haven, there's a common saying, "You are not made of sugar, you won't melt in the rain." When it rains, people put on their raincoats and hold an umbrella and go about their day. When it snows in some of these cities, it's even more difficult to ride due to sloppy conditions and reduced friction. To allow people bike safely in winter, Dutch cities prioritize clearing out snow from bike lanes first before paying attention to car lanes. In Singapore, a common rebuttal against cycling, just like in Nigeria, is that it's just too hot. But in a town called Tampines, 3 times more people cycle than the nation's average because of the presence of other factors that trump a hot weather. I spoke about some of these factors in a previous video and how they influence walkability and car dependency. There are the land use plan, circulation plan, public transportation, urban streetscape, and urban management laws and policies. All these factors also influence cycling, and they can be grouped in 3 interrelated categories. For cycling to become common, Nigerian cities need plans and policies that promote cycling, infrastructure and services that make cycling convenient, and people that want to cycle. Planning for cycling, like walking, begins from the land use and circulation. The way land uses are distributed affect proximity of different uses to residents, influencing the locational distance between residential and non-residential services. Whereas the circulation pattern affects the route between different uses, influencing the travel distance between residential and non-residential services. This was explained more illustratively in another video. To promote cycling, land uses and circulation have to offer short distances and travel times between uses. You see, if people have to cycle for over 30 minutes or over an hour to get to work, school, or other destinations, they probably wouldn't. Does this imply that cycling is not an option for people who live far away from the places they need to get to? Well, no, that's where public transportation comes in. Functional public transportation systems like buses or urban rail are designed to run through densely populated parts of a city, with bus stops or terminals at fair distance from residents. This implies that people can cycle for a short distance and then get on a public transport vehicle. It begs 2 questions. 1. Where do they keep their bikes before getting on a bus, tram, or train? 2. How do they complete their travel to the last mile after getting off? Here I'll introduce 2 other factors: bike parking infrastructure and bike sharing services. With good bike parking infrastructure, cyclists can confidently leave their bicycles at bus stops or train terminals, knowing it will be safe and secure when they return. In countries with low crime rates, I'm looking at you, China, it's common for people to leave their bicycles and e-bikes for days at public bike parking spaces, even unlocked. Cities that promote cycling also require residential, commercial, and public buildings to provide a minimum number of bike parking spaces. That's an urban management policy. Others include declaring or reclaiming streets for bike-only or bike priority use, enforcing stern punishments for bicycle thefts, and providing or facilitating the provision of bike-friendly infrastructure and services. Meanwhile, in some cities, cyclists do not have to keep their bikes before using public transport because they are allowed to carry them along into bike spaces provided on buses and in trains. When this is not the case, bike sharing services allow the public to pick up a bike from anywhere in the city, use them to their destination, and drop them off for someone else to ride around. The experience when getting around is a function of the streetscape. It comprises the elements within the right-of-way of a street or road. Protected bike lanes are the elements of the street that most support cycling. They physically separate cyclists from vehicle traffic, significantly reducing the risk of accidents and collisions. This makes cycling more accessible to a broad range of individuals, such as children and older adults. Other elements of the streetscape that promote cycling are street trees, traffic intersections and signals designed with consideration for cyclists, and proper lighting. Now, here is where it all comes together. When land use and circulation plans allow for short-distance trips to basic services, public transportation supports multimodal long-distance trips, bike parking infrastructure is sufficient, bike sharing services are efficient, and bike lanes are protected, things like the climate or existing practices will matter less, and people will bike. This is not speculation. Remember the Singaporean town? It was the first town in Singapore to legalize cycling on footpaths. It was also the first town to have separated bike lanes and to have bike paths cutting through building blocks. That's no coincidence. In the renowned urban planning book, Cities for People, Daniel posited that when there are better conditions for cyclists, there will be more cyclists. The development of a distinct bicycle culture is a significant result of many years of work to invite people to bike, he wrote. In New York, in London, and most recently in Paris, people have always responded in droves to the invitation. Inviting people to bike is largely the function of the urban government responsible for developing plans, formulating policies, and providing infrastructure. An exemplar case study is Paris, where since Anne Hidalgo was elected mayor in 2014, she has had about 300 kilometers of bike lanes installed, and she plans to make the city 100% cycle-friendly by 2024. During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, she ushered in about 50 kilometers of pop-up bike lanes that were very positively received and have now become permanent installations. Her actions significantly improved Paris's cycling culture, earning her a number 7 spot in Planetizen's 100 most influential urbanists of all time list, despite not appearing on the list when it was last voted on and published in 2017. On the flip side, people can also demand to bike even when they are not invited to. This is what happened in the renowned Netherlands. See, the Dutch already own more bikes per capita than every other European country as far back as the early 1900s. But after the Second World War, when private vehicles became much easily affordable, cars began to take over as the dominant mode of transport, like it did in many other countries. I'm looking at you, USA. But with the rise of the car, so too was the rise of traffic accidents, worsened because Dutch streets weren't originally designed for driving. In 1971, over 3,000 people were killed by vehicles in the Netherlands, and about 500 of them were children. This led to a lot of protests, the most prominent being Stop the Kindermoord, or Stop the Child Murder in English. Protesters held mass bicycle demonstrations, occupied accident spots, consistently visited the lawmakers, and even snuck out at night to paint illegal bike lanes on streets. The government eventually listened and began to promote car-free days. After years of activism, 1 kilometer at a time, Dutch cities, suburbs, and even rural areas are now connected by bike lanes, and they have some of the strongest supporting laws that protect cyclists. The reason for these case studies is to establish 2 ways Nigerians can embrace a cycling culture. We either have urban governments with the technical, political, and financial will and capacity to provide plans, policies, and infrastructure that will invite us to bike. Or we come together and demand plans, policies, and infrastructure from the government that will allow us to bike safely and conveniently. Those are pretty much the only 2 scenarios. If you can think of any other, please let me know in the comments. So I ask again, why don't Nigerians simply buy bicycles and stop crying about the petrol subsidy removal? Well, it's because if they do, they will have to ride for long distances in poor conditions and end up at their destination looking like this, since many Nigerian cities aren't compactly planned with mixed uses and aren't supported by functional public transport systems. It's because if they do, they will have to leave their bicycles outside, not safely parked, and may have it stolen, since bicycle parking spaces are pretty much non-existent and non-required in our cities, and bike sharing services aren't even in the conversation yet. It's because if they do, like the late a strong member of the cycling community in Lagos who was killed in a hit and run in December of 2022 while cycling, they will be exposed to dangerous and hostile conditions with inconsiderate drivers, since Nigerian streets do not have protected bike lanes and bike-friendly intersections. While it is a result of different conditions, I'm personally glad to see the growing conversation about the possibilities of cycling in the Nigerian space. So I won't laugh off Nigerians who have seen this as a business opportunity to sell bicycles and e-bikes. Neither will I laugh off Nigerians who insist that the solution is as easy as getting on a bike, because I have less faith in the Nigerian government to take proactive measures to invite people to bike than I have in the Nigerian people to be triggered enough to demand to be allowed to bike. Until one of them happens, I guess I'll remain frustrated by two things whenever I watch this video. One, how hard I tried and ultimately failed to find the perfect place to slot in "Wahala be like bicycle" in this script. Two, how crazy difficult it is to get around in a country where petrol now sells at about 620 naira per litre and minimum wage remains 30,000 naira per month. Thanks for watching. See you next time.